to Two Dudes Talk Movies podcast. I'm Luke.
I'm Griffin.
And we are back again with another episode. Here to talk about a movie that Griffin chose, so I'm going to let him take it away. Let's hear it.
Sure. So this week's movie is Last Night in Soho, produced in 2021, by Edgar Wright, who also did Shaun of the Dead and Scott Pilgrim versus the World, also previously covered on this podcast. So shout out to all the
Me
previous
and my
people.
7 evil cons.
Yeah. Emerson's favorite movie. And weirdly, we were kind of talking about this movie a little bit. He said, like, this is, like, one of the Edgar Wright movies he hasn't seen, which I'm kind of surprised by. But, this one was just kind of on my watch list for a while. So I was like, looks interesting enough. Let's do it.
Yeah. Film stars Thomasin McKenzie as Ellie, and Anna Taylor-Joy as Sandy, Matt Smith as Jack, and Michelangelo, I hope I pronounced his last name right, as John. And basically, the movie follows Ellie moving to London, wanting to become a fashion design student, but ends up on this weird time trip thriller, mind-bending thing that puts her back into the 60s of London, where her and Sandy are kind of one and the same, but they're different people at the same time, so they're kind of experiencing different things and influencing each other in weird ways. And yeah, it's just a little trippy at times, but
Like, a little trippy is kind of an understatement, but yeah.
it is. But I wrote it in here on my notes a couple times. I think liminal was probably the best way to describe it.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah, like it feels, some of the shots and ways the sets are set up are very liminal-like. I think of the one where Ellie first pulls the bedsheet cover over, and the camera just continually pans, but the cover's expanding at the same time. So it's like this air tunnel almost.
Right, it's like this never-ending tunnel that she walks down and then ends up in the 1960s.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. There's also some really neat one-takes in here where I at first thought that the characters were just being like filmed 2 different times, and then they would splice the scenes, but it looks as if it is just a one take and the characters are just moving in and out of frame the entire time.
I think it's something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a couple really nice one takes in here as well. And then thriller elements are very intriguing. I say thriller, and I feel like most people either think of Michael Jackson or horror, but it's not very horror. Like, there's a couple elements in here, but it's more of a mind-bending thing.
It's more psychological horror than, like, blood and guts kind of horror, like slasher.
Yeah.
It's not slasher, but
Yeah, I would even be hesitant to call it horror, too, because I can't remember what episode it was, but we had to talk about this at one point on the difference between horror and thriller. And horror was, if I'm recalling correct, meant to be very clearly the intent to frighten you, right? And then thriller is more make you feel unease at some points. So, like, horror can be thriller, but not all thriller can be horror.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I think if I recall correctly, that might have been the Shaun of the Dead episode.
What are some things you're thinking about for this movie?
Where to start? I think probably one of the big things we touched on lightly already is kind of like the cinematography. Like, so like for the most part, like the cinematography when Ellie is in London in the present day, it's like it's pretty simple. I wouldn't call it anything like too special, but like once you get into like the 1960s and they're in like these dance clubs and whatnot, like the cinematography really takes you for a spin, and like and it makes use of like mirrors and whatnot. And I think some scenes are like meant to look like they are actually mirrors, but there aren't actually mirrors present. It's just like they're able to like cut seamlessly in and out between them. I think that part of the cinematography is really well done. Yeah,
because with the mirrors, there's 2 scenes that stick out to me whenever you mention this, but then also just watching it. There's the one where Ellie first shows up at the, I'm forgetting the name of it, but I want to say Inferno. This will come up in a second, or maybe not a second, but later on in the episode, but I don't think it's the name of the same place. But basically, it's just wherever they're all dancing at. As Sandy walks down the stairs, there's a mirror that wraps down the stairs, and then Ellie's walking down the stairs at the same time. And then there's another one later where Sandy's sitting at this booth, and there's a mirror wall, and Ellie's on the other side, but Ellie breaks through the mirror. So that one's not really a mirror. It's just a window.
Yeah,
basically. That one's cool. Yeah, I do agree with it. I also like how the colors shift between the two. So the 60s look much, much more vibrant compared to the modern day.
Right.
Which kind of is how things feel in real life too, right? You think back to the good old days or whatever you want to call it, and it feels much more vibrant, right?
Yeah. Because it's like the 1960s was very lively. There was like, I think like it takes on a very like neon aesthetic because it's like there's a lot of lights. It's very bright. It's like people are moving out and about. Cars are driving everywhere. And then in like the present day, it's very kind of, there's still like some color here and there, but it's like not as vibrant as it like once might have been.
There were a couple times I almost was surprised that they didn't put like an epilepsy warning.
Yeah.
Because of just how flashy it was. But
because, yeah, one scene in particular, like on Halloween, like they're at like that rave or whatever, and it was just flashing black and white, like, oh.
Yeah, it's very in your face, but I'm okay with it.
So
Speaking
maybe,
of the Halloween thing, this brings up a transition with some of the costuming. I think was very well crafted.
Oh, yeah.
Not just for the Halloween thing, but just overall balancing between the more modern aesthetic and the aesthetic of the 60s was nice.
I think especially too like the 60s and like, I mean, like I know obviously Ellie's a fashion student, so that's going to play like a big part into it, but like overall like the costume design was just like really amazing, and like I liked all like the different designs and just like how the 60s was able to work too.
Yeah, and sticking with the 60s, I would have to double check everything, but I think a good chunk of the songs that play in the soundtrack are from around then.
I think so.
Having those little needle drops every now and then is a nice touch, and I'm quite fond of it.
Yeah. During one of them, when Ellie's like confronting the old guy in the bar, guess what song's playing on the jukebox? It's Eloise or something.
Yeah,
Eloise.
Eloise.
Thank you. I promise I know how to pronounce things.
Yeah. I fear that I've never liked a movie. So you wouldn't believe this, but I found something I didn't care for.
It's my turn to defend Edgar Wright Emerson. This is for you.
Shout out for that. There's one problem that actually matters. The other one is just a slight thing that irks me, but I don't think is enough to detract points. So I want to make that clear. I'm going to start with the one that I don't really care as much about. It just irks me.
Guys, I promise I liked the movie, but
yeah, that's kind of the vibe I bring to the two dudes.
Yep.
But the one that irks me a little bit is a minor continuity problem, where how I mentioned the Inferno earlier. This is where this is coming back up.
Gotcha.
There is a scene in modern day where Ellie ends up at the Inferno, and it's the same club where Sandy and Jack, who's Matt Smith's character, would be interacting, dancing, and that sort of thing. Except it can't be the same place, because earlier in the film, whenever Ellie is in that weird, I don't know how you'd even describe the state, but whenever she's basically embodying Sandy and her and Jack walk out of the building, you see that crest that's sitting above the door. And then later in real life, Ellie goes back to that place and sees the same crest. That building and the Inferno are two different buildings. They're not the same. But the Inferno has the same interior as the place that has the decal or symbol on the door.
Uh-huh.
It's a very, very, very minor continuity problem, but it irks me. So I can't take any points off for it because it's not really that big of a deal, but it's something that just bothers me.
Honestly, I didn't even notice.
Yeah, it's a very, very niche thing. And I guess you could make the argument and be like, oh, well, they just were in two different places. But if we clearly saw the interior of both and they're the exact same, the exterior should not look like that. And maybe you're like, oh, well, they just put the banner up. It's been like 3 days. When would they have, sure, maybe you could find the time to do it, but drastically change the entire exterior of the building before Halloween? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has the ability to do that.
Yeah, so that one I'm not going to take points off for. It's just something that bothers me. But the one that I will take points off for, and we're going to get into some spoiler territory here, so forewarning. The landlord being Sandy is pretty obvious. I feel like I saw that coming for like quite a while, and so that bothered me. However, the old guy that you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
The film leads you on to believe that it's Jack,
and
then they pull the switch and it's not. For a minute, I was gonna say the same thing because I thought it was Jack, and then they pulled the
Same.
bait and switch, and it wasn't. So I was like, "Oh, hey, hey, you surprised
You got
me.
me.
Yeah, I'm here for it." So that part is perfect. Sandy being the landlord's just a little obvious, and it bothers me.
Yeah, I mean, at first you might like not really realize it. Maybe you won't put two and two together. I think like the general assumption is that like the older lady might have known Sandy, or like maybe they're friends or something. But like the fact that she is actually Sandy is like, I guess, semi predictable.
Yeah, because they make it a point to keep that at least vague for a little bit.
Yeah,
But it gets to a point where you're just like, yeah, I bet it's her.
and it's like I think it makes itself a little obvious on like Halloween when like Ellie and John get back to her apartment, and then like Sandy just kind of comes up the stairs yelling because like Ellie's going through like the same like 1960s modern day mind trip tunnel thingy, where she's seeing like Sandy apparently getting murdered, but like that's not actually what happened. And then like when Sandy like appeared like at the like when she opened the door, it's just like she was trying to get John out, I think, and then it's just like I thought for a moment like it seems semi familiar behavior, so it was like I think that's kind of where I realized.
Yeah, and the thing with it is that structurally and for the sake of plot, I'm perfectly fine with her being Sandy. It's and narratively, I don't think you can do anything different for it to be any better, right?
Not
It's just
really.
it's just how it is, and unfortunately, how it is predictable. So, yeah, you lost me a little bit on that one, but that kind of brings up deep thought. But I don't know if we want to get into that just yet. Unless you have
Probably not
anything.
just yet. Let me look. So you mentioned this doesn't feel like it feels more thriller than horror, even though I would kind of bring the argument that there are some like horror elements to it, like you know with like Sandy being like the murder, essentially a serial killer, I guess you could call it, because she had like all the murdered men in her floorboards and walls and whatnot. It's like she's kind of keeping that literal skeletons in the closet for years. So it's like I guess it's kind of a mix of like horror and thriller, but to me, I would kind of have to disagree that it's like not. No, wait, hold on. I'd have to disagree that there aren't horror elements to it. I would say that there are, but like at the same time too, there are like psychological horror elements that add to the thriller. Does that make sense? Kind of.
Yes, but I'm going to disagree.
Okay.
It's a thing where all thriller is allowed to be horror, but not all horror is allowed to be thriller.
Right.
So it's only a one-way street, right? The elements that you're referencing to be horror with like the bodies and the floorboards and stuff, that's just a thriller thing, right? There isn't an implicit intent to frighten you. It's meant to make you feel uneasy, which are two
Right.
different things. Think of like Smile, for example, right? Both are that is a very straightforward psychological horror film
Yes.
that also has the thriller elements because it's something that's uneasy, but the entity basically is very clearly out to make you afraid. And then whenever you see that entity later on in like its entirety, it's a very straightforward prosthetic horror amalgamation thing, right?
Right.
That's very clearly what that's for. This doesn't have elements of that. However, I will acknowledge that there's the times where those men have their ghostly forms
Right.
and spirit forms going around.
I think that's where I was gonna get to. Like, yeah, they have like their ghostly forms and like and I think that kind of makes it a little bit more horror too.
Yeah. But to me, that doesn't scream horror because they're not trying to scare you or anything. It's meant to make you feel uneasy, and it's all in Ellie's head as well. Which,
Yeah.
granted, you could have a psychological horror aspect of it, but it's not scary.
Right. I'm not gonna say like this is a horror movie because I would agree there. It's not. But there are like horror elements that make it a good thriller, I would say.
I think it's just that you and I have differing opinions on how the thriller and horror
I
work
would-
with each other. I think.
I would
think
say
that's
so.
probably the
Yeah, I
difference
think.
there.
Yeah, I would say like it's not pure horror. I shouldn't say pure horror, but like it's not 100% horror. But like there are. It's kind of like 25% horror, I would say, if we're getting statistical here. But
Well, actually,
actually, it's
feel,
only
I feel like even the elements that are meant to kind of be horror, like whenever the spirits kind of reach through the floorboards and stuff, and start
Yeah.
reaching for you, I can see the argument there. I still feel like it leans a little too much, or not too much. That makes it sound negative. I feel like it leans more towards the thriller aspect still at that point, but I see your point. There's room for interpretation on it.
that's fair enough.
Anything else you want to talk about before a deep thought here?
I want to hear your deep thought. Then
All right.
I might have a question of my own.
Going back to the score, cinematography, and the stuff with Sandy killing all the guys, right?
Yes.
The film makes a pretty strong stance against the men in the film, right?
Yeah.
With these 100+ guys that have all taken advantage of Sandy, and Sandy's killed every single one of them, right? And
Right.
as these spirits kind of plague on Ellie's mind before you realize that Sandy is the one that killed all of them, it's pretty strongly of the opinion that the men taking advantage of Sandy is bad. And I'm not here to discredit or prove that. That's just how the film presents it.
Yeah.
But when we get to the end here, whenever Sandy confronts all these different spirits and then also is kind of trying to murder Ellie, the way that the cinematography is kind of having Ellie's vision of the sea, Sandy in her younger years, and this abyss-like surroundings with the staircase compared to the reality of just this broken down staircase and an old woman coming up the stairs slower than Michael Myers is. There's a difference there, right? Where it almost feels like the film is trying to imply that Sandy is the evil one for killing the guys, and just the way that it's shot and the way that the music plays over it's meant to give that point across.
Yeah.
So the question is that fair? Like, is Sandy truly evil?
I don't think Sandy is 100% innocent, but I don't think she's 100% evil either. I think, like, yes, she was very much like victimized by the men in the dance club, and then she did go on to kill like a lot of people. It just kind of becomes a thing where it's like, do you justify taking that person's life because of that, or do you not? And it's just like murder in any capacity is just kind of, it's just my personal view, but like murder in like any kind of capacity is just wrong. So it's like, I would say no, she shouldn't have murdered them, but like at the same time too, I don't think she's like 100% evil for what she did. And so I wouldn't say it's like unfair for her to be portrayed as her younger self during that vision, but like at the same time too, I'm not gonna like deny what happened to her either.
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar boat there where no, she is not evil because she had a reason to do what she did, and it's an understandable reason. But at the same time, killing people is wrong.
Yeah.
So I think
would say so,
I
yes.
think the better way to explain it is that she is not evil but rather guilty.
Yes.
And so she's almost, I say almost because I feel like men taking advantage of someone versus killing someone is much worse. But I want to say she's almost no better than the men, almost, because they both did something that they're equally guilty of. Right?
Yeah.
So there's not an evil nature to it, right? Where it's not absurdly malicious.
Right.
It's
She's
just immoral and
she's not like
guilt stricken. I don't know how to explain
guilt-ridden,
it.
I guess. Guilt stricken. Yeah. And like she's not like 100% an evil psychotic serial killer either. It's like she had like a reason to do what she did too.
Yeah. I just wanted to pitch that and see what you thought about that, because I thought it was interesting that the film leads you up until that point thinking, oh, these men are bad, these men are evil. And then you have this one scene that feels very out of place compared to that, where it's like, Sandy's actually pretty evil too.
Yeah. And like, I think that's just kind of like the film trying to show like the balance between like, like, yeah, she went through a lot and like but she's also done like some things that also kind of make her guilty too, as you said.
Yeah. You mentioned you might have a question too. Did you think of one?
Yes, it is. I will just say maybe not lighthearted, but like maybe a tad more lighthearted than your question. But
a ponder,
yeah,
a light ponder.
I light ponder.
I bring the deep thought, and Griffin brings light ponders.
It's crazy. Thank you. So my light ponder of the week is, so at the end of the movie, the whole apartment is on fire, and the last we see of Ellie is just sitting on the bed, just waiting for her fate. Do you think Sandy? Oops. Anyway, it's Sandy.
I know what you meant though, so you're good.
Yes. If you've watched the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, we see Sandy sitting on the edge of the bed. The house is burning down. And then like that's the last we see of her. Do we think she could have escaped? Or do you think she tried to escape?
Sandy?
Yes, Sandy.
I don't think she tried to escape. I think she wanted it, because she had that conversation with Ellie where she was like very adamant about like, just kill me. I didn't want any of this, right?
Right.
And Ellie, I didn't change the camera. Fuck. We're gonna re-say that. Ask your question again.
So do we think Ellie could have escaped, or like, do we think that she did escape too?
I don't think she escaped, because you have that scene right before where she's talking with Ellie and is very adamant about feeling guilty for it, right? And being like, oh, kill me, I didn't want any of this. And then chooses to stay behind on the bed. So I don't think she ran. I think she probably stayed there.
Yeah. Do I think she did escape? No, I think she probably burned alive. But do I think she could have? Yeah, probably. I'd say
if Ellie could got out.
If Ellie got out, yeah. I mean, at that point in her life, Sandy's a little bit slower. I mean, we already saw how slow she was going up the stairs in like as you said, like slower than Michael Myers sort of way. But I think like if she had just sat there for a minute and was like, nah, I don't want to die, and she could have gone down like the stairs pretty quickly.
Yeah. It was funny watching that scene though, because Cameron was over and she caught like the last end of the movie probably.
Yeah.
And I was kind of explaining to her like the background on a couple things, because she walked in late, and John in this scene is downstairs on the first floor bleeding out, right? And there's been so much time with Ellie and Sandy where I turned to her and I was like, shouldn't John be dead by now, right? Like, he's been burned a while. And then the split second that I said that, the camera cuts and it shows John's body just like, and then cuts back. It was just a little stupid thing, and so her and I both started laughing, and it was just like a dumb thing that like, yeah. Those are really all the thoughts that I have for this movie, to be honest with you. I'm ready for ratings unless there's anything that you want to talk about that you know.
I think just one more thing that I found interesting was like in the very end scene. It's after Allie's, like, I would say her first fashion show. It's like they're in the dressing room and like she looks in the mirror and she sees Sandy right next to her. So it's like kind of adding onto like my light ponder things.
That's sticking, bro.
That's sticking. Yep, I ain't escaping it now. Or it's like maybe it's a sign that she could be alive, but it's like
I could see that,
because it's like, oh, she's still sticking around Ellie. Like, why is she there? Kind of a thing.
I almost think of it similar to how Ellie's mom follows her around, right? Where it's just something that she thinks about. I don't know if it's anything that's a malicious intent that's like following around and preying on her like the spirits of the men were, or anything like that. Granted, that was its own weird bubble, but I think Sandy being there is just kind of reminding Ellie of where she's been.
That could be it. Yeah, it just depends on how you want to interpret it.
For sure, for sure. Well, with that being said, we're under ratings. So,
Cool.
Griffin, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking. I think my only real downside with the movie is kind of what you said. Like, it's a bit predictable, and like Ms. Collins being Sandy, it's just like after a certain point, it's like you kind of put the puzzle pieces together, and you're just like, oh, okay. But I think other than that, like I loved like the cinematography and the lighting. I thought like that was just really well done, and all like the practical tricks that they used, and just the whole vibrancy of like the 1960s. And the Luke won't agree with this, but some of the horror elements that made their appearance in a thriller movie. I saw that cut, Luke. I saw that one too. But yeah, overall, I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5.
Solid. I can't blame you for it. I understand. Yeah, I think I'm kind of in the same camp where the only thing I don't really care for is Sandy being the landlord is obvious, right? I know I mentioned the minor complaint for continuity. It's a small enough thing that only comes up once, so I can't really harp on it too much. It's just something I noticed. But outside of the slight predictability of Sandy's nature, I love the cast for this and the acting that they do, and cinematography is so good. I really do think liminal is probably the best way to describe how you transition between the 60s and modern day. And the cinematography handles that really well. And like you said, I think it's more thriller than horror for sure. But
and I should clarify, I do too. I just think there's some horror elements to it.
Yeah. But it's a pretty engaging thriller. So I'm seated for the ride. I think a 4 out of 5 is probably reasonable.
All right, good rating.
Yeah. Well, that'll do it for this week of Two Dudes Talk Movies. I'm very excited for next episode. We have a special guest coming on, talking about probably one of my higher rated movies of all time. One of her higher rated movies of all time.
Yep.
Probably her favorite, actually, now that I think about it.
It's one that I haven't seen yet, so we'll see if it becomes one of my all-time favorites.
I will warn you now, if you don't like this movie, you're getting jumped.
Okay, cool. Just to rage bit, I'll rate it half a star now, and then we'll have that discussion.
Yeah, you're going to put
week.
that on Letterboxd. I'm going to see it, and I'll be like, what are you doing, bro? Yeah, so we will see you next week. Time being, I'm Luke.
I'm Griffin.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.